Have you ever wondered how your favorite container goes from concept to reality? Well, today we're going behind the scenes. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart in Georgia.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Bring the outdoors into your everyday life. Bass Pro Shops can outfit all your adventures, even those in your backyard. Bass Pro Shops, your adventure starts here.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
Container gardening dates back thousands of years as our ancestors sought to bring their favorite edible and ornamental plants closer to home and provide desirable plants a hospitable environment to thrive. Containers give us the ability to have tropical plants in cold climates year-round, as well as a pathway for turning a small courtyard or deck into a garden oasis. Today we meet a master in the field of container design. Michael Carr spent the past 2 decades in the business of designing and building beautiful containers for gardens across the U.S. and well beyond. He's traveled the world to find the best partners to build these beautiful creations. His world is an amazing blend of business and artist, and today we have the pleasure of getting behind the scenes to look into the magical world of containers. Michael, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Eric.
On your pathway to becoming a renowned container designer, much of that came through the garden, and there were many influences in your life that led you to where you are now.
You know, this is a good story for other young people. You know what? When I was young, I loved going to my grandma's house out in the country. But I loved it because I wanted to go hunting and fishing, and Grandma would take me to the pond. But she always had to walk us around her little garden. I say little garden. It was just little pots and all. That's just what she loved to do. And I enjoyed listening to her because it mattered to her. But in my mind, I was just wanting to hurry up and get done to go fishing.
Right.
But as I grew up, it stuck. You know, you kind of come back to those kind of things. I love the outdoors and the nature and stuff. And my mom and dad did the same thing. They spent time in the garden. They took pride in what they grew. And hey, here I am. So
That's incredible.
I thank them all for that influence.
Well, your residence and your garden are a display garden of sorts for containers, and
Right.
it's a wonderful way to see all the different ways that containers can play into the landscape, be used indoors, on decks and patios. Let's take a little tour.
Sure.
The world of containers for indoor plants is just exploding, and there's so many options, and it's a totally different world than what it was decades ago. I wanted you to kind of walk us through what's out there, what's available, and what's some new and exciting stuff that you're particularly into right now.
I initially designed bigger pots outdoors and things such as that because that's where the demand was. But over the years, I've had people say, you know, this indoor thing is exploding like crazy, and have asked me to kind of come up with some ideas on the indoor containers. And it's been a fun category. I've created with different mediums. I mean, for me, it's basically 3 things. It's the style, what it looks like, its color, and the type of material. Anyway, I think some of the cooler things, similar to this boat, maybe one day down the road it won't be so cool, but right now it's cool, right? But it's a piece that inside somebody's house, neighbors come in, or family or friends, it's something to talk about.
Right.
But at the same time, it's got to be applicable and practical that you can actually grow something in it. So it's important for me to create enough space to where you can actually put a plant in, it's going to stay alive.
Right.
I think the hottest category right now is still succulents because it's hard to kill a succulent,
No doubt.
right? You stick it in there, if you forget to water it, it's still okay. So many different styles of that. It's just a matter of, okay, how can we create pots that kind of match up with that? I know I have some here that are self-watering. And when I grew up, I didn't know a whole lot about plants, but when I grew up and started learning about it, I remember hearing people talk about these self-watering pieces as more like an African violet piece. Well, I figured out by experimenting playing, you can put all kinds of things. I put ferns in a self-watering, what they used to call African violet pots. I've got these bromeliads in there. And I was told bromeliads, don't put much water on them, right? You just kind of just spray it or something. But I found out these have been in pots for probably 7 months now. Yeah, just keep a little water in them. Anyway, it's fun to play with it. I can do colors, I can do different materials. Like for instance, this is kind of a light cement. Got mirrors and things built in just to give it some kind of interesting look. So you're either matching up kind of a home decor or just kind of create something different. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's a fun category.
It makes sense.
And it's something you can do when you can't go outside.
Right, and for many people, they don't have large gardens. And so, we're dealing with the garden now is either moved indoors with indoor plants, or it's moved into small patios. And so it certainly makes sense from a horticultural standpoint that this is where the garden for many people is happening. And it's fun to see the world of containers, recognizing that and offering significant new opportunities.
You're right. This is a category that's really exploding right now.
Gardening on decks, courtyards, and patios is way, way beyond a trend. It is now the new norm. And of course, most Americans don't have large lots anymore. They have smaller areas, like where we're standing here, and containers are the natural choice from a standpoint of bringing nature right to your doorstep and just affording us the opportunity to grow tomatoes, to have flowers that attract hummingbirds, pollinators, butterflies, etc. And there's so many things that we can do with containers in small spaces.
We created this space here basically to enjoy that part, to bring it to us. And obviously you can't plant a deck or a terrace or something, so you got to bring the pots or planters up here. What I enjoy the most about it is sitting out here and enjoying the hummingbirds, the birds coming around, the bees. What I did here is basically created kind of a barrier, kind of a wind and a privacy a little bit.
Sure, and well now we live in such close quarters. My neighbor, I could almost reach out and touch the house beside me.
Yeah.
And I've used containers for the exact same purpose, just to create a nice barrier to where we feel like we have our privacy. And then all the different levels that we can use with containers. So you have tall containers to short ones, but we can create almost vertical gardening, which I think is a wonderful way to use containers in a confined space. You can get so many more plants into a smaller footprint and also achieve the screening and the privacy that we so desire. There's also little small containers that double as water features, and so we're able to even bring the sounds of nature, the sounds of a river or creek, right to our our patio or deck. It's amazing.
People get very creative.
Michael, I love containers in the landscape, and for me it's just these fun little pops of color. And it's a great way of elevating certain plants. We see this beautiful arrangement here, ferns, begonias. These would typically be, of course, much lower to the ground. This thing's over 6 feet tall. And it's a great way of creating these stunning accent pieces. And I'd like for you to talk about it, as a container designer, when you're thinking about a container in the landscape that you're going to put into your perennial border, what makes for a great landscape container, say maybe as compared to something that would be on a deck or a patio?
Well, I think it depends on the size of the garden. I put this thing together, about 3 months ago, right? And I knew it was going to be a big garden and whatnot, and I knew I was putting a lot of perennials and stuff in it, which are going to grow a little taller. I just felt like we had to have some statement pieces built in just to showcase it all. I honestly wanted to sow more of the pot here, but over time, this thing is so happy. We water it and we fertilize it like crazy. There's two things when I do pots or to think about pots in the garden. One is, do I coordinate it by color, the same color? And I started out that way at some point in time with whites because whites pop. But then I get throughout the year, I kind of get bored and I want to see these pops of color, so I throw in blues and teals and things like that. To me, it's like a playground. I love plants. I love what pots can do to elevate it up to where I get different layers. But I've got development going on behind my home. Right. So I used it kind of to block things I didn't want to see.
One thing I love about using containers in the garden is, especially as we think about a year in the garden. And there are times of the year that are more interesting than other times. And the flower is, or the bloom of a plant is kind of like the sneeze in the season.
Right.
We don't have them for the most part, for months and months and months and months. And a container does a great job of like drawing your eye into the garden, giving you that accent, that pop of color. I love using bright, colorful containers with evergreens as statement pieces in the garden so that, in the middle of January, you've got something that still is interesting and it's a focal piece. And especially with these beautiful large containers, they're like little pieces of sculpture throughout the garden.
Right. And I'll tell you something that I did this year I've never done before, and that's using the fern. I didn't know how it would work, but my goodness, it creates just a full look. The maintenance is really low. You throw in plants with the colors like these dragon wings, it just comes out through it. I think it's gorgeous.
Let's talk about the plants a little bit too, because not every plant is ideal for a container. You could pretty much grow anything in a container that you wanted to. In terms of, say, a perennial border, wide open space, and sprinkling containers throughout the garden, what are some plants that you've used in containers that you're particularly fond of or you feel like are, do particularly well in containers?
I just love dragonwing begonias.
Right.
I love purple fountain grass, things that would just fill it up. To me, they get better and better as the year goes along. Those are some of the fun ones I like to do. I also like to put some hydrangeas and stuff in it, again, to get some height. And then you can play around with all the different annuals and stuff throughout the year.
And one thing I think we ought to bear in mind with containers is it's not the same growing environment as a plant that's in the ground. A plant that is planted in soil has got a much larger reservoir for water, for nutrition. When we look at container plants, and especially something like this begonia that's going to require a fair amount of water, they're going to be more successful if your irrigation situation is more regular. And if you don't have a good irrigation scenario, you probably want to look for plants in containers that are more like succulents or have lower watering requirements. Right. And then maybe the things that have higher watering requirements, put those in the ground if you're in a situation where you're mostly having to hand water. I want to talk about the entryway to your house and the way that you've used containers to create this wonderful, welcoming environment, and also selecting some really high impact color plants that pair well with the containers. From a designer standpoint, what was your thought process in putting together the entryway?
I wanted it to be inviting for people that come visit. I wanted it to be a pleasant walk through it, and I wanted, quite frankly, we all like to be proud of what you do, right? I love caladiums. I love mandevillias. Again, I love the things that continue to grow throughout the year. There's not just a flash in the pan and done. And then you got to think about things that are shade loving. So I use coluses, caladiums, and things like that. On the outside, overlooking the porch, you still get a lot of sun, so I'm able to do mandevillas and things like that. But again, what I look for is that coordination between all the pieces with the texture and the colors and the continuous growth throughout the year.
Yeah, not unlike a patio planting, it's a great way to have a high concentration of a lot of interest, introduce some more vertical elements, and you're creating kind of this nice little private enclosed area that welcomes people into your living space. I think it's very well done.
The most important, and probably everybody knows it, right? But the most important thing is to make sure it gets watered, irrigated, however you want to do it. The drip system, a pot with a water reservoir, self-watering, something, because I think that's where, in my past, is where I've messed up the most. You take care of it, and then a week later, you're gone, you go on vacation, and it just dies, It's such a heartbreaking thing. So make sure you plan for the irrigation.
Right, I think a green thumb is really understanding that water is the most important nutrient by far. Especially watering late in the evening. The plant going through the night dry is particularly damaging, where a lot of photosynthesis too happens, when it's dark. And so, looking at your plant in the morning, looking at your plant in the evening before you go to bed, and just kind of gauging where it is from a water standpoint, that really is the key to success.
Yeah, I'm learning things from you right now. Thank you for that.
Awesome. This is a great example of some of the diversity. What can we do with containers? I think oftentimes people have that question. One thing I love about walking through someone else's garden, and especially someone who's doing something different from a design standpoint than what I would ordinarily do, is getting ideas, as to how I can use these elements and translate aspects of that into my own garden.
I have an opportunity with so many different pieces, and I just, honestly, just in the last little while, I came up with the idea of a pottery trial garden, as opposed to the garden, you know, plants. So what I'm trying to do here is basically put out different colors and different shapes and put different plants with it to let other people experience it and see what it might look like in their yard. Underneath every one of these pieces, I've actually gone to a little bit more trouble to level it out, put a big concrete or stepping stone or something like that, just to level it out wider than the pot so that the ground doesn't give or water and so forth. It keeps them level.
Those are great tips, Michael, and I think it is especially important to think about what is under your container if you're going to set it out into the landscape. You know, another thing that could happen if we don't have something supporting it, I've seen containers in my own garden that are just set on the soil. Well, oftentimes the water can't drain out of it, and
That's
you
right.
basically create something that holds water, and that's clearly going to impact your ability to be successful as a gardener.
Which also in the wintertime, it's going to soak that water up into it.
Right.
And it could create problems when water inside it kind of expands and contracts. So that's a good point.
Michael, another great way to use containers is to breathe new life into a space. And so here's an example of a patio that had a couple of containers that, in the case of this gardenia, was in a plastic pot. It's getting fairly large. It's a beautiful plant. It adds so much to this patio, but it would get blown over in the wind, and it just needed something more substantial, which also gives you a great opportunity to pick out something beautiful. Now it's more of a showpiece, and it's really added a lot of like fresh air to this space.
And it's a great time to think about design elements and stuff. So we're able to kind of look at what the homeowners were looking for, what was special to them, and you know, this color transition for this particular piece. The fact that they're living on a lake, they enjoyed the turtles and the sea life. So it's good to you have a lot of variety to offer that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about using plants for screening. Also putting this in a taller container, it makes that even that much more effective. It brings the plant, you know, just a little bit higher. Or if you wanted a plant to be, you know, more compact, bring the blooms down closer to you. This is a plant that after it blooms, this gardenia could be cut back and maintained more tightly. I kind of like letting these plants just demonstrate their natural habit, and I think for the homeowner here, it also makes it even more effective at shading the property. And I love the container of this. I mean, it's a significant upgrade.
It really makes that plant pop again.
Michael, as we were just discussing, containers do an amazing job of brightening up dull spaces, whether they're in the garden, on the patio. This was kind of a dead space that, you know, was a little tired, a little dark, and it really needed some new energy, and I think these containers have definitely accomplished that.
When we came here and I saw this wall right here, it was a lot of dark brown pots, and same thing with plants, not a lot of color with the plants as well. And I just thought, especially adding some white, just to give it a little bit of excitement, a little bit of pop, just really now makes this wall kind of stand out.
Sometimes in darker parts of the garden, using something that is a super bright color, or in this case, you mentioned the white containers, that almost makes it look like there's a spotlight in this area that doesn't get as much light, and that really needed a little bit of facelift, and that's what I love about the versatility of containers. Beyond the containers, I think also picking the right plants that also bring interest and complement the container well, is very important as we think about, you know, just maximizing the impact for different spaces in our landscape and garden. And I love these selections. These are all new plants. We've got Touch of Gold over there. It's a beautiful yellow variegation, if you will. A super compact plant. I think those make wonderful complements to containers, these dense compact plants. And you know, especially the yellow in contrast with a blue container there. Absolutely beautiful. Using woody ornamentals in containers, I think, is a great idea in general. This is Diamond Spire. It's a brand new gardenia. What I love about this plant is the vertical accent. It's super, super dense, compact. When this is in bloom, it is covered in blooms, and it literally looks like a spiral of diamonds.
It will go great with that white pot.
Absolutely.
A lot of contrast with the green and the white.
So right beside me here, this is Autumn Majesty. This is an azalea that is going to bloom pretty much from spring through fall. So you get 3 seasons of bloom. It's also a nice, dense, compact plant. And of course, once again, these pink to fuchsia blooms in contrast with this blue container, really, really nice contrast. And it's a great selection. Azaleas, as you know well, are wonderful in containers. Super, super durable plants. And I think this is a great fit.
Yep.
So early wonder over here, I love camellias, especially in shady areas. Look at the plants that have been selected for here. These are plants that can work really well in shade. Early wonder is going to be like a fall-ish bloomer.
Yeah.
Most camellias are going to be pushed out into like midwinter or even into like, February or so, depending upon whether or not it's a Sasanqua or a Japonicus. It's got more of the traditional big pink double bloom, which is one of my favorites. It reminds me of the beautiful camellias that would be in my grandmother's garden. And this is a super durable plant too. It's gonna last for years and years and years. Of course, the pink and the blue, great combinations. These are all great container plants. I think it also demonstrates what woody ornamentals can do in containers. We think about oftentimes, perennials, annuals, ornamental grasses. But for my part, I think that woody ornamentals in containers, it's a natural fit.
So Eric, when we came here first, there were some very large pots, but they were more lateral rather than vertical. This home here, I look at it so tall, I just felt like we needed to take those away, put something vertical here and grow up, just to add to accent. These are the pieces I picked, and I think I like the color. I like the texture with what I call a volcanic finish.
Yeah, this part of good design is thinking about what is the architectural purpose of what we're using. And so also I love like the vertical accent plants. This is Senecio skyscraper, really a wonderful evergreen succulent plant.
Right.
And also with this ground cover rose, I love ground cover roses. It's a breeze, it's a new one that's a really, really dark red. And one thing that's great about this particular pairing, these are both plants that don't require a lot of water. This part of the house gets a lot more sun, and so they're extremely well paired to be in a container together. What you don't want is a plant that requires a lot of water and a plant that doesn't take much water at all in the container together. And also you see the kind of the mirroring with this like glaucous, almost blue foliage that really works with the color of this container. And I love that kind of, mimicry, if you will, between the colors in the plants and the container when you can kind of tie them together that way. Or use high contrast, and we see here's Touch of Gold, and with this beautiful turquoise color, almost looks like the ocean. And once again, the gold and the blue. So you're using either contrasting colors like that, or colors that are comparable. One of the questions we get from viewers all the time, especially with regards to large containers, is what is the correct way of basically setting the container up for success? And I just want to mention a few tips I think will really help people have more success with containers. What I like to do is to put a piece of screen in the bottom of the container that basically just keeps our potting mix from coming out the bottom of the hole. And also, you don't need this volume of soil in a container. The root systems on most plants, they're not going to travel 3 feet down. In many cases, the root systems on plants are going to be in the top, 8 to maybe 12 inches. If they're quite stressed, maybe they go down a little bit deeper, but this is a really, really vertical planter. And what I like to do is fill it up as much as a third or even more with gravel, or I like to use those packing peanuts. Of course, they don't typically break down, and it's a great way to upcycle the packing peanuts, and it also makes your container a little bit lighter if you're going to move it around. So in a container like this, you put your screen in the bottom. I'd run packing peanuts up to about right there, and then you fill the rest of it in with a potting mix. And that's really important, isn't it, right?
Yes.
When we think about a premium potting mix, there's 3 things we think about: air holding, water holding, nutrient holding capacity. And in some cases, it makes sense to also have the moisture retention crystals. If you're not able to water your plants all the time, those can definitely help out. And then I would also recommend a slow release fertilizer, either in your potting mix or, of course, on the surface of the soil as you're planting your plants. Many of those can last for 4 to 6 or even 8 months, and it really helps you out from the get-go. So the media matters enormously, so don't skimp on that if you want to have a beautiful container. It is important.
You got it.
Michael, thank you so much for spending the day with us. We've learned so much from you. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Each week we travel the country north to south, east to west, visiting some of the most exciting gardens, as well as talking to industry horticulturalists about design principles, new plants, and also how you can be most successful with your home gardens. We also love answering your gardening questions, so visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com.
These moments of beauty and relaxation are brought to you by Proven Winners Flowering Shrubs, where every plant is performance tested, leaving you free to just enjoy. Find our award-winning shrubs at your local garden center.
Bring the outdoors into your everyday life. Bass Pro Shops can outfit all your adventures, even those in your backyard. Bass Pro Shops, your adventure starts here.
DRAM has been providing gardeners with professional equipment for over 75 years. DRAM products feature 9 water patterns and are designed to nurture your plants with a shower of rain. DRAM for lawn and garden, available at garden centers near you.
You have to rely on your gear. The way it feels, the way it does exactly what you need it to do. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes it SUV.
The marriage of great design and superior materials yields a container that will last for generations. If you have questions about anything you've seen, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.